We're going to introduce ourselves, ask each other some questions, read a little bit, and ask some more questions. And you can talk to us, and we can talk to you. I hope that's what we're going to do. So,
Catherine,
yes.
do you mind just closing the window? Thank you.
Oh, a bit more.
Sorry, it's one of those things.
Oh,
Thank you.
Oh, okay.
Pete,
I always begin by saying my name's Pete Kalu, and it's starting to worry me as if perhaps I've forgotten who I am from time to time. But yeah, my name's Pete Kalu, and I've been writing for a heck of a long time, and I've written 2 young adult novels that have been published. One is The Silent Striker, which is about a 14-year-old boy who's a brilliant footballer, like I wish I had been, who goes deaf, and how he deals with fame, or potential fame, and his deafness. And this one is Being Me by Adele Viale, which is about a 14-year-old girl who happens to be the sort of girlfriend of Marcus in this book, who is also a brilliant footballer. You getting a theme? And she's just a pure rebel, and she's fighting everyone and everything, and it's how she comes through that phase in her life and decides who she wants to be. That's why it's called Being Me. I've written some other things, crime fiction and romantic comedy, science fiction, under mostly my own name and sometimes under different names. And I began as a poet, and I always think I come back to poetry. That's my first thing, really. So that's about me.
okay. I'm Catherine, and I've been a writer for about 20 years. But that's because I'm very old, so it sounds like a long time. But when I was young, I didn't think I was a writer. There's lots of writers. There's lots of people I know. It's like, oh my God. So I was never a writer when I was young because I thought I was rubbish with words. But that was because I hated school, and I didn't start writing till after I had my own kids, and I came into writing through film, and that's really how I make my living. I do write books. I love writing books. This is 2 of them. I don't just write historical fiction, but a lot of what I write is historical fiction because what I like to watch on the telly, I grew up watching telly, and when I was a kid, I used to like the historical costume dramas. And I'd go into school, primary school, because obviously by the time I was secondary school, this kind of thing. And I would want to play them. I'd want to play, because I like the frocks. This is why I like how it's historical fiction. And it was a long time ago when I was a kid in London. It's hard to imagine. I could never have imagined this when I was a kid. And I wanted to play the girls in the frocks. And it was always like, no. So after I'd been a writer for a bit, I thought, you know what? I'm going to write those books that have people like me in the frocks. So that obviously was my aim. So, and I'm a Londoner, and it's a lot about how I feel about London, and a lot of, like the last 2, although I've learned, because I'm not a historian, I was so bad at history that I got thrown out of history in year 9. They wouldn't even let me take the O-level because I was so bad. Because I couldn't write essays. But actually, what I write is the long 18th century, which actually goes on. But it's black people's lives in London. And actually, it's the first one I've written that's not in London. But there's so much that I love about the past, which is really about now, because people are all the same. And what Pete was saying about his Adele Viale novel, which is about identity, it's a lot of what I'm writing as well. But they've also got nice frocks.
Well, I'd like to say that I wanted to wear one nice frocks too, but that might be revealing too much. That's my next novel.
Actually, that's a big and important point about YA now. I was going to ask you, shall I ask you why you write YA?
Okay.
Which is young adult, as anybody knows. And we've got Alex Wheatle here, who's just
Oh
started
my
writing
goodness, we
YA.
do as well.
Actually, you should be here talking about
now I'm
yourself.
going to be rubbish. Oh dear. No. Why I write writing? I think I had moved through quite a few genres, if you like, romantic comedy, crime, and I was thinking about all the subjects that I'd taken on as well, and I finally thought that I'd never really written about my deafness. And I thought, what is the best way to do that, and at what point in my life would be the best place to write about that? And I thought, well, if I go back to my early teens, that's probably what I would call the transition, the crisis period. And I thought, I'm now, we can edit this later and drop 10 years, I'm now about 53. I've got enough distance. I think that's one thing, the great thing about getting old sometimes is you get distance on things and you can look at yourself again with a little more compassion, perhaps, often we're very hard on ourselves. And I thought, okay, let me look at that lad I used to be. Who was, the nice thing I did was I gave myself a little more football skills than I actually had. I was always a substitute, but made myself the striker, the star of the team and everything. Because you can rewrite history through these things. So yeah, I wanted to write, and I thought, okay, this is the best place and the best genre to write about it, I felt. And so that's why I started. And as I was sort of sketching out the ideas, I started to learn about how young adult fiction was bereft of black writers and black characters. And as I read more and more of the literature, with Hermione and Penelope and all these people running around in it, I thought, yeah, we're just not there, are we? So I kind of had a desire then to try and change that as best I could. And I think every time you go and write a book, you go out on a limb, or I do, in the sense that I never know if I'm going to be published. My publisher's here today, Rosemary, so, I'm very grateful. But, you do, when you start writing a book, you have no idea. You spend 2-3 years of your life working on this passion, and so I did it for the passion, and the first one was very much centered around my own life. And then I got into the flow of it, I guess, and when people started reading Silent Striker, they said, but we love Adele, who was the kind of girlfriend of Marcus. We love Adele. She's got all this fight and punch and, don't bother with any of the other characters. Just write Adele. So the second one I wrote more because people said, do it, So that's how I kind of fell into it. It wasn't a total strategizing thing, that I had a plan. How about you?
I wrote it because that's what I like to read. Even, I'd go to the library with my kids and they'd be with the picture books. And it's because I never got on with adult literature because it always felt like it was for someone else. It was because I was not an academic. So I think, what are these people saying? It's like, and also when I went to film school, it's all like, oh yes, we're anti-narrative, blah, blah, blah. And I sort of swallowed that and, oh yes. But actually I didn't understand. It was like, people talking up here. Whereas you read a really good young adult book, and it does all those really difficult things completely accessibly. So you can talk about death, you can talk about everything, love, all the important things, good, evil. There's the best cartoon in the world where you've got two people talking and you've got this old man who's going, oh yes, I'm an adult novelist, I talk about adultery and blah, blah, blah. And you've got the woman going, yes, I write for children, I talk about life and death. And you're like, yes. We do the difficult stuff, but in a way that everyone can understand. We don't put up barriers of vocabulary and say, you know what, you need to be clever to read this book. If you write a really good young adult book, everybody, and it was reading those that did it, and also not just reading the good stuff, because you read the good stuff, and if you are a non-white person in this world, you're used to being shut out of stories. Yesterday, people were talking about, Jane Austen and Jane Eyre, actually, because Jane Eyre was the one, that's like the first big YA book, because she's so, her best mate dies, and anyway. But you're used to being out of the narrative, so of course when you start writing you do put characters that you see in the narrative because that's how it is. But it's about being accessible, and it's about first. So for me, that's why I do it, because that's what I like to read. And I'm just thinking of another one, Philip Pullman, not the Northern Lights ones, the Sally Lockhart ones, which do, especially the final one, which does, there's the best speech about immigration in that book, where her boyfriend, and they're doing it, and they're not even married, and she's a single mother, and her boyfriend, who is this big, he's an anarchist, and there's going to be this massive riot in East London because of all these people coming in, and the baddies have whipped up the locals, and he puts a chair down in the street, and he just says, we're all, he does this brilliant speech. But anyway, so you look at that book, which is all about, it's about women's rights. And it's about, you can do all that, you can do anything.
I suppose the thing that I learned from attempting young adult fiction was how to unlearn the cleverness of the writing. Sometimes when you write a sentence, and at school you get points for being clever, don't you? So if you can get a semicolon in, that's 1 point. If you get 2 semicolons in without a full stop occurring between them, that's 3 points. And you get all these convoluted sentences, and I guess you go through that stage of thinking yes, and then again with the universities and what have you, I'm sure the essay writing becomes this demonstration of how clever I am. And I think that I've always found that the best writing has a shocking clarity, a shocking accessibility. It just connects with you straight away. And a lot of the editing that I do, and then a lot of the editing that is done on me, sorry, is about clarifying sentences, clarifying paragraphs, trying to get it to run cleanly. And that thing that which I've been doing last night, I was just trying to do some editing, that you come up with a beautiful phrase, and I probably won't be able to throw one up now, but her eyes glittered like a what are those things that float in the air?
Flies.
Yeah, her eyes glittered like a zeppelin, something bizarre like that. And at the time you think, wow, what a beautiful metaphor. Nobody will have said her eyes glittered like zeppelins anyway.
For a reason.
For a reason, exactly. But in the moment of writing it, you think you're Shakespeare, don't you? And it's sort of a little while later, her eyes glittered, maybe not. And so that editing, that process of almost simplifying and not having grandiose, elaborate sentences, that's something that maybe why I have done.
Simple, for me, simple is beautiful. I think it's much harder, obviously I'd say that, wouldn't I? I think it's much harder to get, because what we are, I think if you're writing for young people, kids, adults, the less, picture books for me are the hardest thing in the world, but to tell a story, to do it, because what we do is we externalise and dramatise, because we can't have a character, he walks down Farringdon Road thinking of death. We can't do that. You've got to show stuff. You've got to do it convincingly, excitingly, and engagingly, and simply. And adult writers don't. They can just use loads and loads and loads of words.
Well, I don't know. I think the difficulty for all of us, whatever genre we're writing for, whatever age group we're writing for, is really to get into the minds of those characters. And I think that the minds of young people are as complex as the minds of adults, but they're complex in a different way.
I think, but that's, as a writer, because what we do, all writers, whatever age you're writing for, we're playing pretend. And that is the easy bit. It's just like when you're a kid and you daydream about stuff, or you do the pretend games. All you do as an adult writer is play pretend. And anybody who says it's any different is lying. We're pretending. We play the characters, and you have to do it convincingly for other people. So I think it's like getting people to play the game with you. Yeah. Come on, you be the talking dog, I'll be the rabbit that can fly. And persuading other people to go with you, whether it's the past or pretend world or the real streets of an imagined city. that's the thing, because people just go, no, that's rubbish. Come on, play this game with me. Be in the game with me. Wear the clothes. Say the words.
And if you can create that world in such a way that everyone, as they're reading, can enter into it and become the characters, maybe one character marry another, then you've kind of done your job. I have a dressing up story. My first, they're waiting, I can see. When I wrote my radio play, I wrote a radio play called Afrogoth. And I used to walk around as a vampire for a while. Just because I wanted to, at night, I just wanted to feel. I was only about 22. What? I just wanted to try and feel what it was like to be sort of vampiric. And I thought that with a costume, I think it makes you feel more in the part. And then as the thoughts come, you can sort of scribble them down somewhere in your mind and develop them later. So yeah, I do believe that. Even in a less dramatic way, just going to the scene, the place, the location, the geographical location where you're going to set something, I find sometimes useful to in order to inspire me to write that scene. And I hate having to imagine a scene and never having been there at all. Obviously, I've written sci-fi and there are imaginary places that you have to construct, but the base for them I like to have some connection with now. And you time travel backwards.
Yeah, I am actually old.
Well, I'm older than you, I'm sure, but you've travelled, and I read Caribou, and I was fascinated, and I thought, but how does she find all that? How do you do this research to give that flavour, that sense?
You just do enough that you need, what we do is, and all writers do it, we tell the truth with lies. So the stories are essentially lies, but the people, the emotions, what we hope, and that's why I'm saying it's pretending. So we have to be really, really good at pretending. And to go back to YA, I think the thing that I think is missing from YA at the moment is the range of voices, because it's got a very big readership. Well, this country is small readership, small market, small readership, but the people who are involved in it, the bloggers, they have been instrumental in pushing boundaries. So over the last 3 years, we've seen an explosion in different sexualities, in different, and not just gay or straight, ace, or talking about transgender, all of that. But what we haven't got is race. It's like they're perfectly happy to pretend to try on different identities. And you were saying that when I was 12, I did walk like a boy. I wanted to be taken for a boy. I used to practice spitting. That was my thing, but it was only lasted 6 months. And but I think it's about identity. And then, which is a very difficult, because your character Adele tries it on different identities. Caribou she pretends to be what other people want, which I think for a lot of, I grew up mixed race in London at a time where there weren't many mixed race people, so I'd be at the bus stop, oh, you're Brazilian, oh, I've been from every country in the world. Whatever people project onto you, you know. So there's a lot of that with now gender, but there is, why is it still? I think it's to do with class as well. I think it's class and race. It's,
There is the opinion that's been voiced in various articles that the publishing world itself, generally, the mainstream publishing world, is run by the white upper middle class. And for that reason, I think that they imagine a readership, a potential buyers, and their imagined readership is kind of a reflection of themselves, and therefore I feel that's one of the reasons why it's hard for black writers or black characters to break into that world. And so I must say, throughout my writing life, I don't think I've ever been published by a mainstream press. Except the BBC with the plays and theatre. That's interesting. That anything where you do go live in front of a live audience, you seem to sometimes get more traction, more purchase on the. You can get in there a little easier, it seems. I've never thought quite why, but certainly when you publish in text or in print and you write, It's been at first it was the Express who published me. I think I published about 7-8 novels with the Express, and now I'm with. I wouldn't say, and Rosemary, you may tread on my toes and correct me later. It's a press Hope Road, which is run by Rosemary, and who came from Black and Amber before, and who's worked in many other aspects of the industry. But there are very, very few black publishers or black people in the mainstream publishing industry, and so while that is true, then I think that publishing reflects that what gets printed reflects that. Why that astonishes me is because you walk around Manchester, where I'm from, or London, and it's so diverse. There are so many different people running around. I think I was just walking to the train station in Manchester, and there was a line of these parents who have the yellow bibs and the kids don't have any yellow bibs. That's wrong, isn't it? Why not the parents? The teachers are more protected than the kids. But anyway, putting that to one side, but that crocodile thing that they all do, and not one kid was white in the whole class, but both teachers were, and it's that thing that structurally, how do you get into that industry? How do you get into publishing? How do we have more black faces in the publishing industry so that perhaps we then get more breaks?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's life, isn't it? It's, capitalism, imperialism, could go on forever. And we're not going to be grim. We weren't going to be grim this morning. But, yeah, it is difficult. I think I've been published by a lot of different mainstream publishing houses, and, it is a funny world. I've never been... I feel up until, we've got Alex now, but up until recently, it felt like, we've got, like in the royal family, they have an heir and a spare. I've always felt like I'm the spare, they've got I'm the other one, and I've been going to publishing things in I've been published by Random House and Walker and OP, and everybody knows who you are because they recognise you because you're the
only.
Yeah. So I don't. To tell you the truth, I think the only way it's going to change as well. Yeah, we need publishing to change, but we need the way that writing's going now is people won't invest. The only way you learn to write a book is by trying and failing, and then writing another one that's better, and then writing another one that's better. And the only way, it's really hard to do that these days. I lived in another time where there was subsidised housing and working tax credits. And what you need is people to invest in writers and develop them. And I'm sort of talking about Layla Rashid, who runs Megaphone. If there are any people who are interested in starting writing children's books, I think you're full this year, but next year they do master classes. Yeah, and they develop new writers, Megaphone. And hopefully then we'll get those books distributed. I mean, it's difficult because of markets, because in this country, compared with America, the market is very small for all young adult writers.
The statistics in America are not that much better, are they,
No, but they have a big one. No, sales, there's many more people.
Yeah.
And what actually, the way that we're going to make our money is actually in selling books.
Could well be.
So, it's really hard.
I guess one experience that I had when I was talking with mainstream sectors of the publishing industry about my books was the degree to which you can have black characters who are in a story based in now in the UK, so that's contemporary realist fiction with black characters. And it came down almost to a head count. How many can you have? And the nudging that I got was that you can have one black character, you can have one main black character, but then their sidekick or their buddy, their best friend, must be white, to help us with the marketing. And of course, I'm like, well, wait a minute, let me think, because based on my experience, I had many different friends, but they weren't. I had one good white friend who I could model on, but he'd turn up in all my books if I had to do that. My friends are all over the place culturally. They're very, very different, and I thought, why do I have to do that? And so of course I didn't. And then there are others who would say, well, and this is where the genre of writing, as in on words on page, is different in that they say, well, you can make the characters, you can write them in such a way that the readers won't know they're black until it's too late. They've already bonded with it. And you can do it. Just remove all mirrors from any scenes, Don't have them reflect on their physical nature or anything, it's possible. And writers have done it. I could name them. And so there are various nudges and there are various hints and various suggestions as to what you need to do, if you like, if you want to get through.
I'm just going to say I've had different experience than you. I mean, I've always written what I've wanted to write, and the only time I was told to change the ethnicity as a character was actually by the old women's press, who were supposedly radical and right on, who told me I couldn't write a British Muslim character because I wasn't British Muslim, even though if you could only write the characters that you are, I would be writing London Welsh Jamaicans. They're very small, so I have to imagine being others. And having said that, most of my books, Caribou is the only one that only does have one, because it's in the country. But most of my books that are in London, I'm about reflecting the fact that there are all different sorts of people in London from whenever, because I want to say that's the only thing, and I don't agree with saying that books are something about education, except my drum that I bang as a Londoner is that we have been here forever. That is my big drum that I am always banging, that, if you go back 300, what did Queen Elizabeth I say famously, apart from, I have the body of a woman, no, the other way around. I have the heart and stomach of a man, but the body of I've said it the wrong way around. But the other thing she said, Queen Elizabeth I, her with the ruff, she said, too many black people in London. 500 years ago, and you tell kids in school that, and they go, oh, that's racist. Look at me. It was the same. People are the same. And that's why lies work, that's why stories work, because we are all the same. But we want to see ourselves in books, and we owe it to kids to put people like us in books and tell really good stories.
The demographics are...
Yeah, sorry.
Could I just interject and say she also tried to pass a law sending all black people out of Britain?
She was Donald Trump. She had that instead of the hair. She had it. Yeah, no, I mean, exactly. People are always the same. So, do you want to read something before we go on? Because we'll just chat.
I was going to say, the demographics are in our favour, the way that the
I
nature
know, we're not diverse.
Yeah.
We're the future. Isn't that fabulous? It's like, but that's why we've been here forever, because we have. You think of,
I'll have to find a page. So.
do you want me to say something?
Right. Yeah, just busk.
Question, yes.
Yeah, I was wondering if you've ever had, either of you have had issues where editors have said, your characters aren't relatable, because when you're talking about, the kind of pressure you're under in a kind of white-dominated industry, a lot of frequently, one of the really common ways to say that a story doesn't work for you is because the characters are not relatable. What does relatable mean?
I think the advantage I've had, Caribou was the first book. I've written about 20 books. I've been a writer, published writer, for over 20 years now. First time I had a black editor in my whole life.
Nice.
Yeah, and I thought she was going, main girl's not here, she might be coming later. But up until then, I think the advantage I had is also the people who work in publishing, they're all 12. So, as an old, one of the advantages you have as an old woman, and because they're all white, they've got no idea. You go, yeah, no, that's how it is. So, I've never had that. I've never had that. It's not. So I don't know. Maybe children's publishing is different. It's much more. It's very women-centric world. It's class and women, and which works two ways an advantage for men, because it's like and I don't know, writing kids' books is like show jumping. So show jumping, the people who win the medals are all men, but the girls, if you go to even if you go to Viale riding in Hackney, they're all girls dying for touch the horse. And we're all there in kids' books dying to touch the horse, but it's the blokes who win. Sorry.
I think that might be reflected. I read somewhere that the publishing industry at its highest level is primarily blokes, you know, but it's how things change or how we make them change, and I do believe myself that.
I was going to ask a question. I was just thinking, you say how to make it change. What would you say if Zadie Smith or someone decided to publish her next book with Jacaranda or any of this,
No, I think what we need to know, the way to change it, I think Zadie Smith, great, but the way to change YA in kids' books and children's books in general, not picture books and children's books, is to get more writers from different backgrounds. Okay, that is the most, to get new writers in. With children's writing, I think adult writing is a bit like, the new, but that's what we need, more different new voices. And until that happens, but I think that the thing is, I'm not just saying this, if we could get, and Layla, you'll back me up on this one, Layla is a successful children's writer herself as well. But if we could get really more good, I've been a mentor, okay? I've been a mentor, I've worked with the British Council mentoring writers in Africa. One of my mentors won the mentoring writers in this country, and teaching writing. Now, a lot of people want to do it, but when you read a lot of stuff, and this is for everybody, whatever colour they are, there isn't a lot that's really good. That's why I'm saying we want to give people an advantage who don't have the advantage of confidence, and we want to get them to that level. But the thing about publishers, there's two things. Yes, it's really, really difficult to get published, but actually all publishers are desperate for they don't know what the next big thing is. They're desperate to find it. They would, they'd fall over people in the street, but they've got no idea what it is, okay? So what we, and I'm looking, need to do is get new voices and make sure they are so bloody good that they get picked up. Actually, the other advantage, there's a debut this year by a new writer of colour called Patrice Lawrence, and she is the first writer that I know, the publishers are promoting it to a proper standard. So she is doing, it's coming out at the same time as Hay. They're sending her to Hay. I don't know any new, but, you're going to Hay as well?
I went last year.
You went last year.
You're the 4%.
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah.
There is the fact that we do have worked in Manchester. I have my little logo ready here to see at Culture Word. And we do have our own programme. I think I handed out some of the flyers. And we're doing, Culture Word is a Northwest Writing Development Agency that covers the North primarily, but we will work occasionally with on a national level, and we are wired up with Megaphone in our own way. And we're looking for new writers. We're hoping to promote them, and we run mentorships. We have a workshop that's probably the most long-running Black Writers Workshop in Britain, because it's been going for about 25 years at least, and we have an advanced fiction group. We have many things to bring writers on, and we've brought through quite a number of writers, primarily in poetry, but also we're just getting through some of them in fiction. But we do face that same thing, that we think the writing is marvellous. And it's, I think, if I may, one small anecdote. Last Thursday, I was reading, I won't mention her name, she might be embarrassed, but I was reading a piece by this particular writer, and it was so amazing. It was just flying off the page, and I thought, this is wonderful. This is as good as anything I've read this year in young adult fiction. And then there's this thing, okay, but she's not getting published, and why is that? So the analysis of why is hard.
But I would say, because I'd say the opposite to you, because actually I do read a lot of stuff. Yeah. I very rarely see anything that makes me just go, when I do,
Yeah.
I have stood up. I have been an advocate for that book. Sorry.
Well, I understand that, but like, isn't that especially because there aren't enough opportunities for young writers to develop?
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. So
to
what we
develop
need
that
is
path, right?
critical mass. We need to give people the chances that I had. I was groomed by a small press who sent me out on loads of courses.
Yeah.
And we need to, and in a million years ago when there was money, we need to do that. That's what I'm saying needs to happen, so that there are loads of us.
I agree with that, but I think it's also true that that isn't sufficient. That one can bring the writers on, one can have brilliant writers, but the market sometimes might look, or the industry is like a sheer cliff.
Oh God, yeah, no.
And so there are things that we must ask questions of that cliff, not just of ourselves. I think the talent's there. I think we could bring it on. I think we can get them all to the point where they're publishable, where they're all wow. But they won't all get published to the same degree that white writers would get published unless something changes.
But that goes, I'd say yes, but that goes, if you look at it's so hard to make a living. And the only reason for writing a book is because you want to do it yourself, because nobody's going to give you the money.
Would you like to do a reading?
Yeah, sorry, because we've got to go. I'd be depressed.
Okay. Well, the thing about reading is is the one I'll take my glasses off. So this is my last view of you before I take my glasses off to read the book. You all look lovely. Flattery. Is that I've always had this dilemma with reading, because when you write for novels as opposed to theatre, the voice is often internal. So actually reading aloud sometimes it doesn't feel quite right. But this piece is okay. Because it's a teacher, and he's addressing the detention class. And I look around and I think, you all know what a detention class looks like. You'll be fine. So he's called Mr. Chips. Reflect quietly on the error of your ways. That's the title. ACA, the afternoon detention class. It's from The Silent Striker. Mr. Chips was running the afternoon detention class. Marcus knew the ropes. He chose a desk at the back and slumped in his chair. After 15 minutes of his life, another 15 minutes of his life about to be wasted. There were 18 of them in detention. It was a disused classroom in B block with a ripped out ceiling. Some people said it had asbestos in it that could kill you. Others said it used to be a storeroom for canoes. It smelt of mould. Mr. Chips got into his groove. Now, if you wish, you may play along. You can be the detention class, because I like this bit. Right. Fold your arms, sit down, and be quiet. You are here for misbehavior. Those of you who have been fighting, think of other ways you could have resolved your conflict without resorting to pushing people's heads into doors, Benjamin. Marcus settled back. He actually enjoyed Mr. Chips' little roast things. Mr. Chips continued. Those of you who have been late to arrive at class, think about what steps you could take to get to class on time, such as not stopping in the corridor to compare notes on boys you fancy. Kaylee, Abigail. Those of you who have been misbehaving in class, consider the effect your behavior has on others who want to learn but can't because of you. Not everybody in class wants to indulge in a farting contest. Andrew, Mustafa. Those of you who are here for any other reason, reflect quietly on the error of your ways. Mr. Chips craned his eagle head. There will be no talking, else you will be here again tomorrow. And you wouldn't want that, would you, Alex? No, sir. I've got basketball practice at break tomorrow. Sure, some fool, year 7 boy Marcus did not know. What part of there will be no talking did you not understand him, Chaz? Shot Mr. Chips. But you asked a question, sir. The question was rhetorical. Does anybody here know what rhetorical means? Look it up in your dictionaries. I don't have a dictionary, sir. Mr. Chips sighed theatrically. A rhetorical question, Imtiaz, is one which does not require an answer. Now silence while you all reflect. I want to hear only the sound of your brains humming with reflection. That's it. Thank you.
I'm going to lower the tone. I was going to... The beginning of this one is like an operation because he's an apprentice surgeon, which is bloody. But the other one, the other beginning I was going to read is... I've never read the beginning of this one because it's so awful. Because what it is, this book is... It's about this girl who pretends to be someone else. And because it's... Although she was a real character, Mary Wilcox... I've changed a lot. I've, do that thing that fiction does. So I've absolutely, squished the story down. Because she was in London a long time. She had a child out of marriage. It went to the Foundling Museum. It actually lived for 6 months. She used to visit it every day. She got a job in Islington. And then he died. And then she left London after she'd been ruined. So I've squished everything into one chapter. And I don't get to read this. This book, it's got a little thing on the back which says, not suitable for younger readers, and it's primarily because of this scene at the beginning. So I'll just read a little bit of it. She's decided to leave London. She's had a miscarriage. Everything, her life is shit. She's decided to go home. In my story, she is mixed race and from Devon, and she's just outside of Bristol, and it's the 4th of April, 1819. They hit her from behind. Didn't take much to fell the girl on account of the fact that she'd been walking for the past 7 days and had eaten very little, so was close to utter exhaustion. She did not think, in the state that she was in, caked with dirt from hard travelling, that anyone would look twice upon her. Not in that way. She knew what to do, what to say when men looked longer than was decent, but she'd felt powerless and weak since she'd lost the baby, like an empty ghost. She'd heard of this happening to London, in Devon, and happened to girls, both in Devon and London. But she'd done nothing, not a word, not a smile, kept her head down. Her hair was full of twigs from sleeping in hedges and barns, and her slippers worn quite through. She had done nothing. The men were laughing. One pushed down hard a booted foot in the small of her back. The girl hadn't the strength to struggle, nor even the breath to cry out. There were 2 of them, and she could not bear to open her eyes, even though she could smell the cider on them and feel the breath on her neck as they pulled her clothes. Ain't never seen an arse as brown as this. It's flatter than a boy's. Jesus bones, you sure she's a maid? How would you know a maid's arse? I heard it's only chickens have made your acquaintance. The laugh came out as a snort. Chickens and your ma. They both laughed this time, and for a few moments the girl thought that perhaps they were both so taken with their own wit she would forget they were there. They would forget she was there. She concentrated all her strength and tried to inch herself along the ground. Here's our maid wriggling away. Her arms were dragged back behind her and her face pushed into the dirt. The girl murmured a prayer, but she knew that the Lord did not look kindly on girls such as herself. If he did, she would have had the means to pay for a coach all the way from London to Exeter, and maybe somewhere to sleep that had a roof. As it was, she'd prayed hard every night, and never so much as 1 penny found its way into her purse. She had only herself to rely on, to believe in. Hadn't her short life proved this? Other people, men especially, brought only pain and suffering. Here, she thought, face down in the leaf mould, was more proof. Perhaps God thought she deserved no more than this. So that's the beginning. It does get better. Thank you for listening. If any of you want to ask us any questions about anything, I don't know about football, I know about knitting, I know about some... Anyway.
How many of you are writers in this audience, if you're on a show around the sea? Okay.
Everyone.
And how many are thinking of going into YA fiction?
It's fun. It's when it's all. I mean, because it is a long time since I was a teenager, but it is fun. It's pretending, and it's such. The reason why I think it's such an appealing genre is because that age group is so full of firsts, and everything is new, and the world is new, and your opportunities are boundless.
my question's kind of related. What do you think is distinctive about the YA genre?
Well, it's all first. It's that you can do everything. It really is. It's about the storytelling. It's because we have to dramatise. I think there are a lot of similarities between YA and children's and TV. I work in TV because it's that same amount of you've got to show us. You can't rely on what's going on inside people's heads. It's about dramatising story. It's about being clear, and it's about being accessible. So.
I mean, I haven't read much YA. I've read Natalie Blackman's stuff, but I was just wondering, is there much difference with what's going on with America, I guess, firstly,
Yeah,
authors compared to British, how they're writing?
Well,
and
they have it's weird, America. When I started, I've only had a few books published in America. None of my historical books, because obviously the view they want of Britain is Downton Abbey. And, but some of my contemporary, they've got a much bigger market, so there's more kids. And also because, you go to, my cousin's a librarian in downtown LA, and they have book groups, and the kids go to them, and authors, they go, oh yeah, I talked to a book group, and they were all like 16-year-olds sitting around because they're not going to drink here. There's other things to do. Who wants to sit around talking books? It's not, but in America, it's different. They're sort of younger for longer, so there's a bigger market, but it's more compartmentalised because there's a big enough black market that there tends to be different separate markets. They are. I think it is getting different now, but here there isn't the money for that.
do you think British writers, American writers in Britain are received in a different way or a better way?
Better, yeah.
Yesterday we had something came into the Guardian about the weekend, Guardian weekend, and we're so happy all the authors have come, but they chose to highlight the non-British authors, so Zen, Kelly Kaneyama and Jane Yeh, all who aren't British.
In some ways,
why are they concentrating on
because
them
they
and not?
usually have the marketing spend, because if you're published in America...
No, this was the Guardian that wrote about these. They chose to highlight these three people rather than any of the British people.
Are they safer? Because they're over there? You don't have to have the debate about what's happening here. That's what Claudia Rankine was saying about the whole climate in Britain, about how we can't talk about race. How at least in America we're trying to talk about race, she's saying. But in England, she has that example in Citizen, where the white writer, when asked to talk about the death of a black youth in awful circumstances, said, well, that's not my job actually, or that's not part of me. And she was saying, why, what is it that makes you think you're so divorced from this? You're living here, and
even as a black writer trying to write about the death of Mark Duggan, that's a really hard thing, or trying to write about slavery, or trying to write about anything that makes people get a little bit itchy, and you can get rejected really easily for subject matter.
No, that's true. That whole thing with if you're writing historical novels, there's either you get, I've been like, there's slavery in this, or there isn't slavery in this. You can't.
Yeah, you can't win.
No, you can't win. I think the problem is that it is such a small amount of non-white authors that work in children's books, and you could easily get them round a table in one room. Yeah.
I just wanted to pick up on something you said about the black the market for black literature being bigger in the States. I think that's really important, and I totally agree with everything you've been saying, that there aren't enough non-white people in publishing. As a result, probably there aren't enough non-white authors writing in YA and children's literature. And I must say that developing Megaphone, all the response I had from the publishers and editors was really positive. It's not like they're going, it's not like they're going like, no black people. It's not like that. It's a much more sort of covert. It's something
they do without
thinking. They don't even know. Yeah, exactly. And,
I find it goes to the marketing department often the fig leaf used is the marketing. They say, we can't sell this. It's brilliant writing, but we can't sell it.
And it's a can't sell this thing that I'm thinking about, because when they imagine a reader for a children's book, they're not imagining a black or an Asian child, they're imagining a white child.
Yeah.
And I wondered what you thought of the idea that maybe black and Asian and other minority ethnic readers need to be more visible, because I frankly think that you know, and it's not necessarily criticism, they're businesses. Publishers are not necessarily going to change their ways and their methods unless they can see some financial.
That's that coming back to that thing about how theatre and how you get a faster take up sometimes in some of these live performance areas. In that, when I go into schools, and I was up in some schools in London recently, and you've got a very diverse audience. You tell them a story, they absolutely love it, and they're desperate for the books. Then, you know, and you think, hey, they're not meant to like black books. No, we have these kids loving the stuff, wanting the stuff, but it's getting to that readership, getting to that audience that seems to be almost impossible. It's not impossible. We mustn't be believed, but it's tough. It's difficult.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily the whole publishing company. Sometimes you can have individual editors who really champion black writing or Asian writing or whatever. Sometimes when they take an idea to the dreaded what do you call it?
What's it? Marketing. The meeting. The big.
That's
acquisition.
The start, because the editor has to get 2 more editors in that publishing house to champion the book as well. But even
the one thing
when they do that, it's not enough.
No, because they need the sales team to go. Yes, we can.
Marketing and so on, and so it becomes much more of a difficult journey.
That's the one thing we have done. And you know, I know Alex, you've done great work, battering at the doors. But and Mallory Blackman came on board, and this thing about you can't have a black kid on the cover of a YA book. You know, that's the one thing we're broken. You know,
and it's broken now. Also, young adult editors now know that today you have the most tolerant young society in this country's history, and they know that they need young people going to the school libraries and those young people be reflected in the books that they give to them. They know this. And the people in the industry know this. So now I think even though there's some negative things being spoken about young adult literature, now is actually the best time to be a young adult writer, because they're on notice now. They're on notice. They have to get those kids reading.
So
hopefully that'll give some hope to.
I hope you're right. Yeah.
I just want to say it's quite interesting because the whole business case issue came up years and years ago, and we did a couple of experiments, hi Alex, many years ago, Alex was involved in one of them, where we tested people's understanding of who's writing. You have a book in front of you, you don't know who's written it. You don't know who's written it, you might not understand the name or something that might give you a clue, but the truth is you don't know. When you give people, the test we did was to get a group of authors, and we did it with Daily Telegraph, we did it with Sunday Telegraph, Daily Telegraph? It was the Telegraph. And we,
Times.
The Times, yes. Yeah. And we asked them to see if they could match the writers to the pieces of work. They could not, and in fact, I remember a big David Baddiel fan in my team, young white girl who just loved and read everything that he'd ever read, and thought Alex's piece was written by David Baddiel. Now, what was really interesting about that is then when we talked to the publishers, lots of blushes, because they actually know. They know that the demographic that's growing, the fastest growing demographic is dual heritage. They know all of this. The only Asian minority group is African Caribbean. The rest are all young, growing, expanding exponentially. The business case has been made beyond and way beyond, especially for YA, because it's such a young and growing market. So when anybody talks about that side of things, it has been categorically disproved. So those things that keep coming up perennially, it's like, no, stop using that argument. It's not.
It's because the industry is so
and it's monocultural in its thinking. But there's also an issue that you raised about. There's an issue about authenticity. So the reason that they will choose the writers who are not from this country is because they believe they have a more authentic voice, because they still can't quite get their heads around a voice that is from a person of colour in this country having the same authenticity as someone from Nigeria, someone from Pakistan, someone from so the people who are reading these books in the publishing houses, at whatever stage, there are notions of authenticity in the words coming through that are challenging their own thinking. So unless we have those conversations about the biases that they don't recognise with the industry, that stuff isn't going to change because they don't even realise they're doing it.
No,
Even if they want to publish the stuff, all the voice isn't authentic because to them it's not reading in that way. It's got nothing to do with the writing. So some of that needs to be challenged with the industry quite robustly.
No, I think, yeah. Oh, sorry.
There's a
Can I
gentleman.
just quickly, just before you say anything, I just wanted to say that I think that that's all really, really true, and I think that's all valid and relative. But for me, I think the bottom line is that we have to do it ourselves. We just have to do it ourselves. We can't actually stand by it and wait. And I think we should be challenging them at every step. But I think also we should be doing our own thing and saying, hey, we can sell over here. We can get these numbers in and just do it ourselves. It's not. I've been 20 years in it, you know, and I've been 20 years in the game as well, and and I know people who've been 40 years in the game, and they've been having this conversation, and we're all really, really tired of the conversation. And I think this is exciting to me. Sitting here and realize that this is exciting. This is the way it should be done.
Part of that, doing it for ourselves, sometimes is to say, okay, well, in my sort of path through this writing life has been to not get too fixated on one form. So, you know, the novel form is one form, but I've done theatre, I've done radio, I've done film, I do poetry, I'll do installation, I'll look at a picture and write a poem about it, I'll do anything just to keep the wheels turning.
That's to do with making a living. I think, you know, you have to. I think if I could have a magic wand, I would definitely go for the job where I can stay in my pyjamas all day and have a cup of coffee. I would just do books because it's lovely, you know, and everything else.
But setting up publishing houses is a harder thing, and I think we have to support the black publishers who are taking that on, because you know they will not get coverage, they will not get exposure in the mainstream press, they will not get a table on Waterstones because you have to pay for it.
Should publish her next novel with Jacaranda. Imagine the
No, because that
So we got Hope Road,
Yeah.
we've got Jacaranda, we have oh sorry.
Yeah.
No problem. I mean, I've got slightly more structural kind of points to make, and I take on board that seeing a book in print and published and going, kind of taking those conventional channels on where we've been unrepresented is really important. But I'm also thinking, like, book publishing is quite a conservative field that's also under attack commercially by other means, and a lot of the kind of logic of economies of scale meant they would go for whatever was more mainstream. Now that's crumbling with digital, and I wonder if partly what we need to think about is also, like, should we be focusing on only books or also on other digital materials which young adults might have a different way of accessing, where we could be in with a different thing. I mean, I know in the States there's been a lot on just gaming and having diversity of characters within gaming. You know, maybe what we're looking at is the old castle that's falling apart. We need to take what we can from it and look at other media where we can kind of be more.
I'm trying not to say that. I see poetry and flash fiction and short stories kind of falling apart and reassembling, as I say in Claudine's book and in Citizen, and a lot of the new poets seem to be mashing that up. In terms of the novel and that old sort of tree stuff, I can see that it could go onto platforms that are more fluid. But I simply like to be able to carry a book. And I like to be able to read it in various situations without having to find a socket.
And kids do too, actually. Although there is an explosion in e-reading, especially the younger kids are, the more actually they like a physical book. But there are other ways of doing it. And there is something about a novel, which is that story, the long-form story that goes in your head. And it's that pretending thing, isn't it? It's about, because when you're reading a really good book, it's like you're in the pretend world.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So, yeah, I mean, maybe there are, but I think that's something that probably will happen, because people will take it. You know, you are a product of what you consume. So if you're somebody who is into the story world of games, you're going to extrapolate and make, you know, go forward with that.
I'm thinking also of like a lot of non-serialised press.
Yeah.
when they were released. Like,
Yeah.
there may be other models
There
out
might be
there
other ways to
which
do
might
it.
be a way of creating a buzz around something. But
Well,
allowing that same
crowdfunding
immersion.
books. That's something that people are doing, you know, and that's definitely a way to go. I think it's all, everything is hard, because when you write something, it's like, you know, you're encouraging people to look at your pretending and to say, oh, give me the money for it before I've done it, or, you know, you've got to have such a lot of confidence, and that's something I think it's hard for a lot of people who write, because a lot of people who write don't have the, you know, they do it precisely because they don't have to stand up and do it. It's something they can do and go, here it is. You know, you don't have to go, like, be a poet, which is something else.
Ultimately,
Oh, we have to stop.
Yeah,
Well,
sorry.
you can buy all these books, people, and support us, and our many children and decrepit pets. We will sign them.
yeah.
Thank you very much, guys,
Thank
for an
you.
amazing session.
Thank you.
Thank you to